Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have just around an hour to complete this session, and we do have a very interesting and power-packed panel that will be discussing the nitty-gritty, or at least some aspects of the nitty-gritty, the professional approach to the topic that has been assigned to us, and that is intelligence, security, and resilience in urban ecosystems. It's quite a mouthful, but I think we do have a very distinguished panel which can take up this task. And may I now invite them to please come up here on the podium, Mr. S.B.K. Singh, Mr. Bhaskar Rao, both are distinguished police officers, Mr. Michael Brown from Deconair, and Mr. Haiku Ku, who's from the Speaker's Corner in the UK. Now, what I propose to do is that I think I'll make some introductory remarks and then invite each speaker to come and share his thoughts with you here. And I'll assign each speaker around 10 to 12 minutes because we do have to keep the limitations of time in mind. And I do not know, Maruf would be able to advise me later on towards the end of the session whether we have any Q&A or not. As per the program, there doesn't appear to be a Q&A. So, like I said, that we now shift from the overall overarching discussion that we have had about security, resilience, and what we need in these fields in the urban ecosystem to the more intricate and the more professional requirements that may be necessary to really make our cities safe and secure. Now, needless to actually delve on this fact, but India, as also other places in the globe, we are progressively moving to a more urban environment of living. India already has around 35% of its population, which is a huge number demographically, living in cities. And by 2030, I believe around 40% would be living in cities in India. Similarly, around the globe, by 2050, over 6 billion people would be living in urban areas. So, why is this going to be so? Because there are drivers. There are very serious drivers and pull factors, ranging from economic drivers, educational drivers, cultural drivers, and other social drivers, which compel people to come to the urban areas. So I don't think we can wish away urbanization unless we go in, and I don't know why we are not talking about it, into a segregated model of development, like Gandhi talked about, turning every village into a kind of entity which would support itself economically and therefore contribute to the general weal. Maybe that may be a better idea. The disaggregated system of development which we had earlier conceived of, but nobody talks of it now. We are all focused on what we need to do in the metros, and we only talk about smart cities. But be that as it may, I think urbanization is an inexorable process, and it's relentless. We need to acknowledge that and try and do what we can to take care of the problems and the pressures that globalization and urbanization are going to inflict on us. Now, there are going to be huge pressures as a result of this on governance, on public services, on civic amenities, and on law and order itself. Therefore, being smart, which essentially means using technology or other strategies and tactics, which would enable us to run these services and systems and generally regulate urban life in a manner that it does not turn chaotic and stressful. So that is what I see as smartness. It involves social capital, infrastructural capital, intellectual capital. So as well as the looking after our environment itself. So environmental capital, all these will be required to make a successful urban climate. So being smart is no longer an option. It is a necessity. That is the only way that we can really regulate our lives in the coming period. And being smart without being safe is not being smart at all. So you have to be safe and secure in order to be smart. The traditional crime frameworks, and now I'm coming down to the specifics of what the police and the security agencies are going to face. The traditional crime frameworks will persist. Crime as you know it today, conventional crime, will persist. And you'll have new threats emerging, including cybercrime, which is going to be a very, very important facet of the new crimogenics that we are going to experience. Now, technology and ICT that we have been talking about as enablers are also going to serve those who seek to do harm to us. They are going to be as much used by law-abiding citizens as by criminals as well. So ICT is a great vector change, a greater vector change than has happened ever before. And in terms of crime, it is equivalent to the discovery of the asphalt and the automobile in the 1930s, which made one of those famous American robbers called Dillinger travel several kilometers and commit several robberies. Today you can do that sitting in your room across the globe. You can hack into bank accounts, go into misuse financial services sitting in your room. So basically what has happened is that this very technology enables the criminal to travel at the speed of a proton at 186,000 miles per second. He can do that, and he has cyberspace which has infinite reach. So that is what crime may look like 10, 15, 20 years hence. We have to start taking notice of it right now. And all the little cliches that we hear, or little acronyms that have been given to the newfangled crimes which could emerge, like, for example, self-radicalization. Self-radicalization can take place sitting in your own room, in the basement. From the basement to the battlefield. There is no intermediary involved in that. You're seeing that happening in the case of self-start radicals in the West. Even in our own case here in India, it has been happening. So from the basement to the battlefield is but a small step. And then you have digital networking of criminals across space, time. You have digital networking. So crime is much less risky, and this is what we have to gradually contend with. In a smart environment, what is going to happen is that the more we use ICT, the more individual and national lives will be tied to the efficient functioning of core infrastructure. For example, your energy needs, your water needs, your transport needs, your financial services, your manufacturing, all will be enabled by ICT. And they will tie your lives and our lives and national lives with the cyber world itself. So this is going to be a new problem that is going to emerge. The unfolding IoT revolution, which will integrate our physical world, our physical information systems into our daily needs and into the digitized world, is another aspect that we have to take care of. So these are the problems that are going to emerge. So what is going to happen is that hyperconnectivity will mean hyper vulnerability. I think that is something which has been said by all the speakers who have gone before me, and perhaps much more eloquently with exemplifications of what could happen on the ground. In a more integrated environment, the cascading impact of crime will be immense. So will be the cascading impact of natural disasters. if your electricity circuits and your electricity grids are cut off, you can imagine what is going to happen across the economic spectrum and what kind of losses that is going to entail. So this is where the new criminals, the newfangled criminals, are going to be focusing on, and this is what we need to protect. Now, how do we do that? I can't go into the details of how to go about creating a risk management system which could take care of all this. But there are countries which have devised it. There are countries which have devised it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We merely need to follow their example and mutatis mutandis, apply it and tailor it to our own domestic requirements. We need not take everything from them, but we can borrow some of the ideas and tailor them to our own requirement. What the other countries have adopted, especially the USA and the EU countries, is a very wide-ranging risk management framework. Now, I would like to go into the details, but that is a separate topic by itself. This wide-ranging risk management framework is interrelated in a sense. It covers safety, it covers security, it covers resilience and redundancy, and it enables quick recovery if an attack takes place. This has been done. This is the model that is being followed for the various problems, or rather to meet the various challenges that we have been discussing in the morning. This is the more professional approach which has been done, and it is all threat risk analysis led, it is all intelligence led. The USA has, from 1998 onwards, evolved a system and a policy that is called National Infrastructure Protection Policy. It's a very, very involved framework that they have. Very, very involved framework that they have. It's been done through 2 presidential directives in the time of Bill Clinton and Bush Jr., the 2 presidents of the United States, following the attacks on Nairobi and Dar es Salaam in 1998 by the Al-Qaeda. It has evolved. It's a very intricate system which establishes a overarching authority, that is the Department of Homeland Security, to look after critical infrastructure protection. It has identified and documented all the critical infrastructure in the United States of America. Now, we don't have anything of that sort. We don't even have an understanding of how it is to be done. Then it has created synergies, both horizontal and vertical, across governmental agencies from top to bottom, and between governmental agencies and the private sector. The private sector has a role in both providing information and in information sharing, and in their interrelationship and coordination with the governmental agencies in an institutionalized framework. For example, in our own context, if we take a huge power plant set up in the private sector, a UMPP, an ultra-mega power project, it requires a threat and risk analysis of what the security threats are, because you can't protect everything. If you protect everything, you're protecting nothing. So you have to prioritize. Now, that has to be based on intelligence, and that intelligence can only come from governmental agencies. So you have to have a framework of institutionalized coordination between these 2 agencies. So that is what they have created there, and that is how they seek to handle it. And let me finish by saying that smart policing and smart security are in fact the bedrock. Now, there are a lot of problems that we have with our policing. Not that the policing is not good, not that policing has not evolved over the years, but there are serious deficits. I'll just bullet point these deficits. One is police budgets, abysmally low. It was under 10 billion in the attacks in Mumbai took place, it's now risen to 20 billion. It's doubled, but it's not enough. And 99% of it, at least 90% of it, goes on establishment costs. So there is a modernization fund. It's not enough. Modernization fund also meets mega city policing. So this is one aspect of it, budgetary constraints. The second aspect is, are we prepared to be able to absorb the funds that we get? Many police forces even surrender the small amounts that they get for modernization because they are unable to absorb it. Then the police has always has a legacy of being a colonial instrument of the ruling class. It is not one which was used to delivering public services during the colonial period. Now that has to change. That has changed. But that interface that is required to be set up with the public and public trust in the true Peelian sense, the Peel's principle of police operations, trust of the public is absolutely fundamental to efficient police functioning. Then we need consensus that the police is an instrument of the law, and we need political consensus on that across the board, which is difficult to get. And it has to rise above partisan considerations. Then we need to use technology enablers wherever we can. We are a bit technology averse in the police in India, although the younger generation, I feel, is much more savvy with the use of technology. So with these opening remarks, I'll just wind up here and now call on Mr. Heiko Koo to speak on haves and have-nots, rising discontent and threats to the security system. Mr. Dahl mentioned this whole problem of haves and have-nots and how it contributes to the problem of law and order as well as terrorism. Now, Mr. Heiko Koo, for some of you who may not have heard of him, is from the Speaker's Corner, that very famous podium in Hyde Park, I think, in the UK, where you can go and express yourself. I mean, literally express yourself. Say anything that you want to, and you can. There will be people to listen to you. He's been an activist since 1986. I think you have a leftist leaning, in a sense. Yeah, he does have a leftist leaning, and he will articulate his ideas on capitalism and so on and so forth. Now I call upon Mr. Koo to come and speak to us. Thank you. You have 10 minutes, sir.